Well, good morning and welcome to another little wee video. I thought it might be fun in this one to have a crack at a Nobel Prize. Not that I want a Nobel Prize, but it might draw some much needed attention on the field of interest that I participate in and that I have in my life. The Nobel Prize is offered by Professor Jim Al-Khalili, who is up to his so-called up to here in the conundrum of the twin slits experiment. And if you haven't any comprehension of what I'm talking about, I suggest you jump on YouTube and just type in twin slits experiment, and you'll be just as bamboozled as poor old Professor Jim, who I hope to help out with this video. Unfortunately, the barrier that I have in being able to do that is the language barrier. I'm not a scientist or a quantum physicist, and I'm going to suggest that my field of specialty, I guess, if you could even call it that, a specialty, my field of interest, that's better, is the transformation of the mind through spiritual pursuit or application of spiritual principles. And when I say spirit, I'm obviously using the Latin translation of the word psyche, which comes from the Greek mind, to think and to remember. So, where to begin? It's hilarious. All right, so Professor Jim asked that anyone who can explain it sensibly and logically, please get in contact with him. Well, I don't know that sense and logic particularly come into this too much, but I'm going to try and use reason to make a case for you, Professor Jim, and anyone else who's interested, to begin to participate in a new kind of experiment. Being a scientist, I'm sure you'd be quite familiar with experiments. However, this experiment is going to be outside the field that you're familiar with, I would imagine, since quantum is the way that I've come to know you. Excuse me, there's some mosquitoes biting me here. I'm going to offer you an experience through an experiment that you can participate in yourself that is going to prove to you, without the shadow of a doubt, that everything is one thing. Everything is Higgs boson. Everything is, and when I say Higgs boson, that's the only scientific reference I have for you guys that have come thus far to discovering that everything is singular. The experiment is being ongoing, and I call it an experiment loosely because once you achieve a result in the experiment, it's no longer an experiment. It becomes something factual within yourself and something that you can't avoid and you no longer need to continue to experiment with. But this experiment operates on an individual level. So if one scientist participates in the experiment and gets the positive result, they'll be able to publish perhaps in a more psychological paper, rather than a quantum paper, the result, because quantum, there's a bridge that is needed here in understanding to go from why twin slits does this to being able to comprehend it with the mind that doesn't know. Can you hear that? So the mind that doesn't know why the twin slits does this needs some preparation to be able to prepare itself for the answer. Because you're one with the result. You're one with the outcome. And until you have the experience of knowing what that oneness or that singular nature of life is, you're going to look at the twin slits experiment through eyes that are unaware or that are asleep or that are ignorant of the singular nature of life. When you experience the singular nature of life, you'll see twin slits everywhere. In your relationships, driving the car. You'll see the outcome of that twin slits experiment throughout time and space being a symbolic reflection or a symbolic representation of your own interaction with the environment. Now, if I were to put it religiously for a second, and you have to follow along. I mean, if you want to be a true scientist, you have to follow along and try to keep an open mind, which I'm sure you will be doing, an open mind to all things. And I remember reading a little article that Stephen Hawking was looking into religion just before he passed, as a way to try and explain the conundrum he saw within himself in his relationship with the universe. But if I were to use religious references from the Hindu, from the Christian, from the Buddhist, and from the Sufi, I would tell you that the external world is a symbolic representation of an internal state of mind. That state of mind is faithful and allegiant to the identity that I assume about myself. Now, in the ignorance of my position, and I'm speaking separately of myself here because I've had the experience, but in the ignorance of my position, I assume about myself, I assume for my identity that I am this physical person talking into a camera and presenting a scenario, whatever, just like everybody else seems to be, separate. Right? Separate things, walking around, saying stuff, doing things, whatever. Trees, planets, all separate from me. I have autonomy. From the experienced perception of myself, having shed my ignorance and embarked upon a period of training and experimentation within my own conscious association with myself, I have arrived experientially at a singularity in my mind, which we can call God or Higgs boson, I don't really care, wherein I see myself as everything, not just this, but including this vessel or this vehicle for my experience, my teaching, learning experience, my testing, experimenting experience. You following along with me? Right? I'm not excluding myself from my experience of the world. I'm including myself in. I'm not observing myself with a camera, and I'm also not observing myself with a camera as I pass as particle and wave at the same time through those two slits to produce two different results based upon my perception of myself, observed or unobserved, in my consciousness. So life is thought. My thoughts are based on my ignorance, or my thoughts are based on knowledge. My thoughts are based in darkness, or my thoughts are based in light. My thoughts are based in love, or my thoughts are based in fear. I'm coming from one of either of those two perspectives in every moment, in every decision, in every observation that I'm making. And in fact, when I'm in observation of something, I've actually stepped back. I'm including myself in as the observer. And in that sense, I become in the world, but not of it. I don't have to react. I have the power of conscious choice of whether I get caught up in the drama of the world or whether I choose to simply remain as the observer and allow the world to, pass by, be in the world, but not of it. When I'm not conscious, when I'm engaged in the world, and when I am caught up in the drama or the flotsam and jetsam of potential, which is what time and space is, about my identity of myself, right? I find myself in a posture of then attacking and defending every conceptual thought that enters into my consciousness to try and maintain my perspective of myself based on the identity that I've chosen for myself, right? Which cannot not be from my ignorance, right? And that's a good thing. Obviously, the transitionary period that we call the spiritual transformation or mind training, whatever, is the back and forth between those two states, wherein I'm the observer and then I am the prisoner of my world, if you like, or I'm the free man stepping back in observance, or I am caught up in the potential. Right? I'm either observing what's going on, right, and therefore my mind is giving me the result of that because my mind projects out into the world exactly what I want based on the perspective of myself that I'm using through which to see it, or I get the opposite result, which is chaos. Now, I talked about an experiment that you can do to prove to yourself that you are the manifesting agency for the world that you see. Not the physical nature. Obviously, that tree there is brown and green and whatever, and I'm not talking about being able to make it purple with spots of, pink and whatever. But we're talking more psychologically. I'm talking more psychologically where the relationship that I have with that tree or that person or that situation or event can be changed to bring about let's say a change in the habitual responses that I have as an ongoing, interactive, revolving door kind of relationship, same shit, different day, can be changed to bring about in me an awareness of a shift in my consciousness that is aligning or truing up to a new goal that I choose for myself in my participation, which is my barometer for progress, which is inner peace. That's the spiritual path. Now, science obviously is trying to find the one quintessential element, or not element, I don't want to get caught up in elements, the one quintessential point or singular premise that explains everything. Obviously, since Descartes, I think, therefore I am. It's like, well, what is that? What does that mean? That'll drive a man mad. I think, therefore I am. You can just sit there and go, yes, I think, therefore I am. But what does that actually mean? I think. Try to find where your thoughts are. Try to find where they come from. That place in your mind that these little bubbles of speech and conceptual, possibility emerge from. The twin slits experiment is only proving, to me anyway, what I've known for 25, 30 years, or 25 years, maybe, to be true, that everything is one thing, and that I can choose to see that one thing two different ways. Now, when you can understand, when you can hear that an alternative way is being offered to you, wherein you can see your interaction with the world and with the universe as beneficial or non-beneficial, as simply as you can see the results on the board of that twin slits experiment based on your new goal, which is inner peace, you're going to have to admit to me that it would be foolhardy to continue to participate in a way that offers no result. And you'll probably say, well, we've made results. We've had many tests bringing us up to this point. And I'll say to you, yes, and there are many spiritual aspirants who are very clever with many concepts that can bring them up to this point, the here and the now. The here and the now is all there is. If I am one with everything, then there is nothing that is outside my mind, because I'm only aware of what my thoughts are telling me about what I think I see. And there is no such thing as time, because the past and the future don't actually exist. In the here and the now is the moment wherein I can experience life as, let's say, an observer on the physical plane, wherein I can choose to react or interact with it, or where I am consciously choosing and not subconsciously reacting. And beyond that, in a meditative sense, the here and the now, as a position of stillness, as a point of stillness, wherein the thoughts in my head, or your head perhaps, Professor Jim, the thoughts in your head which say, why does the twin slits do, maybe it's because this, maybe it's because that, become quiet. They fall quiet, and you are able to enter into a deep inner silence wherein something else can happen in your consciousness, an illumination. And you're not going to believe me about that. You're not going to even admit that it's possible. But Einstein said that I think it was Einstein, we only use 5% of our brain, or 7% of our brain. And if you equate brain with the functions of the mind, equate brain with the activity of consciousness, then you only really have the senses and your thoughts about the senses that you're looking at. I'm telling you that there's more that can happen in your mind. Like that. Which allows an opening of the conscious level to the, what would you call it, the higher conscious level. It's like a connection to occur in you, which reinvigorates and enlightens you through an experience of actual light within your own mind, which is what happened in that moment just then. And it's beautiful, it's funny, and you can't see what's going on in my head, but I'm offering you to, I've often thought about it, those hats that they have all the sensors and what. I remember I went to Marine World on our Sunshine Coast about a decade ago, and they had a scientific display there, predominantly for children, I guess. Everything was very small, but there was a plaque that you could put your hand on in the shape of a hand that was wired up to a meter, an electrical meter, and it had on there the electrical system output of a body, right? There was a dolphin, which I think was 2 volts. It would measured in volts or whatever the measurement was. It was 2. A human being was 1. All sorts of different. There was half a dozen things there. I forget what they were. But you could put your hand on there and check that you were actually a human being and not a dolphin. And as a simple test, because when I do that in my mind, it illuminates my mind with light and floods me with light. I thought I'll put my hand on this and I'll open my mind through the meditative practice that I've developed, and I'll see what happens. And I went from 1 to 1.5. And there's a couple of little kids there that were watching me do it, and I'm sure they were like, but anyway, back to the twin slits. I think the best result you can have in determining why it does what it does, because I mean, I've talked to a lot of people. It's like Jesus says, don't cast your pearls before swine. And I don't mean to call you swine, Dr. Jim, but I know for a fact that you'll be scientifically entrenched in your field. And I'm telling you that to effect a suitable result that you're going to be satisfied with, you're going to have to jump ship from your field to another field for a second and pursue the same line of inquiry with a different, using a different language and a different technology, a different kind of experimentation. And unfortunately, it's not going to be an experimentation that you can produce, with a display or anything, but perhaps your fellows might be very interested in what you undergo in your own association if you were to write a paper about it. So, and there's an incredible book that you can get, and you're probably not going to want to participate in this, but I don't know a better way to begin other than to get yourself a copy of A Course in Miracles. Don't ask why it's called that. Get yourself a copy of A Course in Miracles, start reading it, and then do the 365 workbook lessons, which will help you to retrain your mind to a new perspective of yourself and everything and everyone in the world, which will then bring about an availability or an awareness of, an availability of a possibility to collapse the potential that is in you for the maintenance of the physical entity, so that you can exit the physical vessel and experience what life is as one thing. Higgs boson and beyond. Infinity and beyond. I don't know if that sounds very reasonable, that you would want to pursue that, or that you would want to jump ship and do something else. And I don't know if it's a great deal of logic in there. I mean, what can be called logic in an unknown field? I mean, really, you have to allow yourself to drift off the edge of the map of consciousness of what you think things should be and shouldn't be, which is where quantum is at, and allow yourself to be okay with that. But that takes a little preparation. That takes some mind training. It takes some purification to be able to step into the void of your own mind, the void of your own consciousness, and come out the other side unscathed. It's like going into a black hole. Well, you're out the other side before you go in. Welcome to the world of spirituality. Welcome to enlightenment. Welcome to what's beyond the twin slits. Welcome to what you can't understand. You have to experience for yourself. All right, well, I love you. Thank you for listening. I don't know if that gave you any kind of a prompt to want to look at what I've offered you, but at the very least, for $25, get yourself a copy of A Course in Miracles. You can jump online, order it, and start reading it. Step outside of the framework that you've developed to put yourself into the twin slits conundrum and look at it from a wholly fresh angle. And you'll see that all that you are looking at is your own action of mind. Observing, not observing. That's all that's going on here. And as we transition from the chaotic to the peaceful, the twin slits experiment becomes redundant, because that's all it is showing you. It's showing you that you have an alternative way to see things. It's showing you that there is a choice. All right, peace.